Thank you for this opportunity. It's always a joy and a privilege to talk about how God brought about Mintz Christian Academy. It all started one day. I got a phone call from a gentleman that used to live here in Roseville area, and he later moved to California and been living out there most of his adult life. And he had some property here. And he called me and said he'd like to meet with me, and I came and we met. And he said he had about 25 acres of land he'd like to give the church if I could tell him how we were going to use it. And I had to admit that first of all was a surprise that somebody's getting ready to give us 25 acres right connected to the property of our church. And it was also a surprise that I had no idea what we would do with such a gift. But I did promise him one thing, that I would appoint a committee and would begin to study what God might want us to use this land for. Because I believe within my heart that God never gives you anything that He doesn't have some kind of purpose in mind. So right after that, I went to the Baptist Convention in Greensboro. We had a convention that year. And when I was there, they began to speak about the church reaching out to the community. The church going back to its original roots. And one of the things they promoted was maybe the schools ought to, maybe churches ought to begin to look at having schools. Because in the early days, that's where reading and writing and arithmetic was taught in the little schoolhouse of the church. So when I came back, that what really impressed me, and I gave a lot of thought and prayer to it. And when I came back, I appointed a committee called the Vision Committee. And we began to meet regularly. And I told them the purpose of us meeting was to try to determine what God would have us to do with the 25 acres that God has given us. We looked at a lot of scenarios, but I presented to them about the educational program, about starting a school. Well, naturally they were a little concerned and a little fearful because we were just a little country church. Didn't have a lot of resources, and it was going to be an expensive endeavor. So I made contact with somebody in Federal that was running a Christian school, and Eddie Matthews and I met with her for supper at Ruby Tuesdays. And we sort of drilled her about how do you start a school, and what would it cost, and what kind of investment would we need to be looking at. And she told us that we should start out in our church and use the facilities that we had. And she estimated that it would cost probably the first year at least $50,000. Well, I brought that back to the committee, and we talked about it, and we prayed about it, and we looked at it, and we talked about several scenarios, but finally we began to zero in on starting a school and what that would entail. I contacted the county inspector and found out what we had to do to the church to have a school in it and use its facilities. What kind of capacity could we count on starting a school if we stayed in the church? The inspector came and laid out several things we would have to do to the building. Enlarge all the doors to 3 foot. Change a few things here and there, which we undertook immediately and began to do. Because the committee decided, yes, let's move forward with starting a school. We took this recommendation to the church body, and we talked about it as a church body. There was a lot of concern, a lot of fear naturally, of undertaking such a task of a country church. A lot of people in the community discouraged us, said that starting a school right here in the middle of nowhere, probably nobody would come, plus starting a church with a small congregation was probably more than the church should take on. But I felt very strongly that God was in it and that God was leading, and I let the people know that I really felt that God would have us to move forward and explore starting a school, which we did. And the church supported us. The church voted and said, let's explore it. So one of the first things we needed to do was to find a principal, somebody to help us move forward. And we had someone recommended by the school in Fayetteville. That person recommended an individual to us, Joy McDowell. We met with her. We had prayer and asked her to consider it and to look forward to us moving forward, and she did. She later called and accepted the position, and we brought her on as a part of our church staff. And she was given the task of developing policy and procedures, as a task of looking at how we would run a school. Where should we start? How many grades should we start with? And we decided to start with K through 3, I think it was. And we moved forward and we did all the renovations in the church and got the church ready. And we were told by the inspector that we could expect to max out at 72. We could not have more than 72 in the church building. That's all it would hold. So the first year we had about 25 to enroll. And the church began to grow, the school began to grow from that point. And at that point we appointed a building committee to look at what kind of buildings we were going to need. A lot of people suggested we buy some trailers. I was very much against that because I thought it was throwing money away, that we would use them and then would have to move right out of them into a building. Eventually we was going to have to build a building anyway. So we decided to research what type of building we could build and how soon we could build it. And we began to work steadily, meeting with various contractors throughout the state of North Carolina. I drew the plans for the building, the original building that we're in now, called the elementary building, and took them to the church. The church voted on them and approved them. We got a quote about $3 million to build it. That scared the church slam to death, even scared me, but I felt that still God was in this thing and that God had resources beyond our expectation. The scripture says that He has resources that abound, and I just trusted that He would take care of all that we were going to do. I came up with a plan, financial plan, on how we could pay the mortgage through dinner theaters and fundraisers and various activities that we would put on throughout the year. And so we moved forward. And within about 4 years, we had reached a capacity on our school of 72. And that we couldn't go any further. We were going to have to either not grow or stop. And we had gone to grade 5 by that time. So we voted to build, and we were building, and the building was going up pretty rapidly. And by the next school year, which we would have had to be out because we were doing an enrollment, we had an enrollment of about 80, and we could only take 72. But the building was ready about September. We were about a month behind, but we used a church in that month, and so we got ready. And so we were ready, and the rest is history. God took care of us. We never missed a bill. The church was behind us all the way, and the school grew rapidly, and it grew to where it is today of better than 311 students. And God is behind it, was behind it, and continues to be behind it. And to him we give him all the glory. And we are proud of our school and the students and the faculty that make it up. Thank you very much.